she beautifully titled Love and Memorial, so which was really wonderful. And I did include memorial pieces, but today we're going to focus on love and affection. And historically, Valentine's Eve was when all the parties were and celebrations and the drawing of lots for Valentine's Day. So it's very appropriate for us to be here. And also, this is really the perfect location. We're not, my Valentine history doesn't include too much of Greenwich Village, but in the 1840s and around that era, the area south of us was Publishers Row. There were many companies where they lithographed Valentines, and there were newspaper offices and publishing houses. And many of the old Valentines that I have addresses that are streets that you would recognize. And Brownie Poe lived in Greenwich Village. And one of the articles said that he probably walked past this street on his way to work, every day. So it's kind of interesting to think about that. And Chelsea kind of expanded. She said, well, our borders really don't go as far as the Bowery, but for this purpose, we're all enjoying Valentine's history. What I collect really are the most personal, the most intimate communication between people. And when I look at a Valentine, I coined the phrase, the fingerprints of love, because you think of everything that's on them. There weren't all Valentines. Postal systems took a long time for delivery, and so a Valentine is considered as a month before February 14th or a month after. But the same things can be sent any time of the year. We call them tokens of affection or expressions of love. Many of the same things we see for Valentine's Day may have a date of December or August or something, but it's all the same kind of feeling. I'm going to give you the evolution of the Valentine through this presentation, but I want to give you a little bit of background. There was someone named St. Valentine. Valentinus lived in Rome in the 3rd century BC, and the 3rd century AD, sorry. He loved the young couple. He encouraged couples to get married. And the emperor at that time, Claudius I, was very upset because his concept of a strong army did not include a married soldier. And so Valentinus was warned several times not to really encourage these marriages. But Valentinus persevered, and finally he was brought before the emperor, and he tried to convert him from paganism to Christianity. It was the last straw, and then he was sentenced to be executed. And the story is that while he was waiting to be hanged, he restored the sight to the blind daughter of the jailer and left a note to her with a sign simply for Valentine. Think of that as a Hallmark poem, because I haven't seen that printed anyplace. I did see it on fire, and it sounds good. But the other part of the story is that there were many wonderful Roman holidays. One, which was like the rites of spring, was in February. It was a celebration, and there would be a lottery where names would be pulled out of an urn, and the name selected would be the lottery for the year. This was a very popular Roman holiday that the Romans enjoyed by Britain, and when they left that holiday. People didn't want to give up. And so during the church allowed the holiday to survive, we changed the name. They honored Valentinus, who was martyred in February at that time. So we have these two things coming together. We don't have any Valentines really in the for many years. And then the church encouraged people to choose a purpose, choose a saint for Valentine. And so we have devotionals. So I'm going to start this and give you some of the background before I read it, as I can relate to it. So this is one of the earliest places where the lights couldn't get away. Yes, that is the anyway, this is a page from the Nuremberg Chronicle. This is a page from the Nuremberg Chronicle. And this one is in Latin from 1493. And it's the first place where the martyrdom of Valentinus is described. This is the first place where Valentine's Day, where Valentine's Day was mentioned. This is Chaucer, a ballad. And here we see the assembly of fowls, and it's where it says, all fowls are gathered before nature on St. Valentine's Day to choose their mate. Here we have one of the earliest precursors precursors of the Valentine. This is a devotional. It's a devotional. We call them that. There are other names. This was cut from parchment, and it's from about 1700. You can see the design of the hearts and the flowers and the little frilly frame around the Saint. This is for St. Paul. These were made by nuns in convents, and they were sold for charity. They could be personalized. I've seen them without names inscribed. A little saint. Okay. And this is another one a little bit later. The first one was on vellum. This is paper, and this is Strasbourg, about 1750. And there are these little dancing sacred hearts. They're called canivet in French because the canivet is the name of the knife that was used to cut the crocos for calligraphy, and so it got adopted. Sometimes they're made with scissors, these were made with that kind of knife. And you can see they were to emulate tatted lace. And this is another, also late 1700s, and this one has a design around the center that's one of my favorites. It's the endless knot of love. Like the wedding band, it has neither beginning nor end. And in these early ones, there was path of enlightenment. You would follow that path theoretically. It might be inscribed with words. This isn't, but there would be words, and you would find Jesus. But later on, it became secular, and you wanted to find love.
Is the law related to Celtic?
Well, it looks like it. Yeah, and I don't know if there's a connection or how they adopted it, but this isn't, but it's a good question, because I think that sometimes myself. And this, everything that I collect has a story. If you're collectors, and I hope you all will become collectors, because collecting is such an exciting adventure. The people you meet and the experiences, and this was bought at the flea market in Paris from someone who knew that it was worthwhile. And this is another paper cut, because we're following the evolution. We weren't having manufactured, we had handmade ones. And this is from about 1700, 1710. And when I think of it, I always think of unicorn tapestries. I look at the costumes. And, it's just wonderful to see her headdress and his boots and his tricorn. And the imagery is just really beautiful. Another paper cut. Elizabeth Cobbold was an 18th century English poet, and she would have a party every year, and she would do her paper cuts, and she would wrap them up in paper and put them in a basket, and they would be drawn just like the early lottery, and people loved to go to her parties. We're following, as I said, the evolution, and here we are in the late 1700s, 1800s. This is German, and here we have a movable. We call these Biedermeiers as a kind of a catchphrase because it was the Biedermeier era in Austria, and these are movable, and it has a pull tab. So here they're in each other, and they have their hands clasped, and they're wondering what they have in their hand. And then the next slide, you open their hands. It's like this. If you show me what you have, I'll show you what I have. So yeah, they should really be on the same image. And the mechanism, there's strings, it's like the early movable books, and they're wonderful. These got much more elaborate, and they became items like this. This is about 1820. This is very small. It's probably only 3 inches square, and you can see initials that look very far right. It looks like IE. It's really Johann Endlitzberger. He was the most famous manufacturer of these early pieces. They were used for New Year's and for name day and for love. And this one, which is the New Year's card, you see the signs of the zodiac, and the Mother of Pearl is a book that opens up and that you should be inscribed for the next year with good luck. They all, I guess, maybe, I don't think so. It could be Cupid. We'll analyze. But the little flowers, they're die cut cold and then hand painted. And all of these scraps were handmade at that time. This is very small, as I said. And behind them, you have, you can see them, wonderful embossing. So this is, and that was a whole era. I want to go back to that for a minute, because this was, we're thinking of an era when people just loved giving these luxurious gifts. They were almost like games for adults, very elaborate. And there were many manufacturers and many ateliers where they manufactured these. This is the earliest written piece that I have. It's dated 1684. It's the flyleaf from a book where someone was practicing the Valentine poem. And it's signed Edward Sangan, Tower Hill, London. It's October 1684. And if you look at any of there are two main books, both out of print on Valentines. I still have to do my own, but this is pictured in both. And the last owner gave it to me as a gift, which was a real treasure. He's passed away. Really appreciate it. Again, I said we're following the evolution because these are our gifts. This is on the left. It's a quarter size, it's like 8 by 10 piece of paper. There was no lace at this point that was commercially made. Someone uses a scissor probably to cut this design, and the mail system was such that you paid by distance and by the weight, so envelopes were not generally used. And so on the back of this, there was a folded over sheet. You see where it was addressed to this woman who was a young milliner. And the image shows the harvest, which is a romantic theme. Another one, here a punch has been used to try to create lace. And this I put in front of the window in my library just to get the light coming through it a little bit. It's one of my favorites. The taper is wonderful, thin, handmade paper. And this is the image. It's the sailor again, and that's the sailor's outfit. His striped pants and his jacket like that is very common. And we have the altar of love. They're flaming hearts. They're no longer religious hearts. They're secular love, romantic hearts. And cupids on both sides are aiming the arrows. And at the bottom we see an anchor, and the message says love for love. And this is just a very delicate early piece. I would say also about 1800 or late 1700s. About the same time, this is an engraving. And things were being made by engraving, wood engravings, also, and lithography. And this is an engraving done by Francesco Bartolozzi. There are two that I have signed by him. I don't think people realize that he made Valentines also to their famous engraver. But the theme is one of my favorites. It's the sailor's farewell. The sailor is going out. You see the ship is there. The fellows are in the little boat on the right, and they're, come on, hurry up. But he's kissing goodbye. The Cupid is up at the top, aiming the arrow. And in the picture, you see classic. You see the home in the front with the smoke coming out of the chimney, and you see the church in the background, the steeple on the left. So it's sacred marriage. It was a very important theme. On the ground, we have his little ditty bag, and that scarf that he used to enclose his possessions, they were also made as Valentines, and I do have some of those. They're very good. This is a close-up of that picture, and the images are just beautiful. You can take any section and enlarge it, and it's wonderful. There were Valentines for every kind of person, every theme. And here we have in London in 1832, we have the political Valentine writer. And there are scathing poems inside to all of the prominent political, and I think some royal names inside. There were other Valentine writers for regular people who just didn't have the knack for creating poetry. And they needed something like a little booklet or a little cheat sheet. And so they were made for all kinds of purposes. They would often have a beautiful frontispiece like this one, also hand-colored. This is a comical one, and there were poems for the trades, like, for example, for a baker who would say something like, I need your dough, or a butcher who would have something about the meat. I know, there was something for every type. This is a sentimental romantic one, Cupid's Annual Chart. And these were all published in the early 1800s in England. We have American ones, and I have an American one in the case over here on the right. They were smaller, more pocket size, but they were very popular for a certain time. Here we have the same kind of an image that we had before the Bartolozzi. We've got the house with the chimney and the thatched roof, the church in the background, and on the bottom we have the quiver. Of course, the arrows are in the quiver, which is significant, and all of the implements that pertain to harvest and home and the churn of the land. This is another kind of Valentine. We're talking about 1820. It was engraved. The figure on top of that altar is Hymen. He's the god of marriage. And this is for the other. We have the sentimental, and we have this one. This is 1816, I think. And this is Devil's Darling. Devil was a very popular artistic theme.
That's odd for Valentine.
Well, these were sent sometimes to someone you didn't like. They were almost never signed.
Interesting idea.
Sometimes people say, well, this Valentine was never used.
I might use that.
Right. People say, well, these were never used because they're not signed. But often they weren't signed. That doesn't mean they were never used. And this was the one time of year when a woman could send something to a gentleman. She could take the upper hand, so to speak. So who knows where it was sent to?
What does it say on the bottom?
It says, the devil's darling, sure are you, that all your friends well know. And you, like all the old maid tribe, to hell this way must go. There are some comic ones. I think in this case over here I put a few. I just have a few different kinds for you to see firsthand what they really like. But this theme, you hear about these penny dreadfuls later on, and you'll see some that were 1880, say, but this is early. We're talking, 1820, 1816, and we know because of the dates that are on them and the watermarks. So analyzing these is really a lot of fun. This is another one. She's an ugly old devil, and I usually pair her with a fellow who is kind of an ugly imp. But again, devils. And here she's a homely lady, and if you look carefully, you'll see it's Division Street, New York City. There are, I can't even think of the names of the streets right now, but there were many manufacturers who were in New York. And some did these engravings, wood engravings and lithographs, and some imported fancier Valentines that were available in Europe. So if you were wealthy enough, you could buy something very beautiful like some of the other ones you'll see. This is another one, and this is was one of the earliest publishers in New York City. And this is The Gambler. And this is part of a group of 3 that I have that were sent to the treasurer of New Jersey in 1849, I think. So one of them is called Fishing for a Wife, which I have in a case. But they are kind of fun. And they're just wonderful to have. This one, there were attacks, like the comic ones. This is in English, it's a Windsor Valentine. Okay. And she fell like Lucifer, never to rise again. She's a fallen angel. So collecting Valentines doesn't mean that they're all, lace and, beautiful imagery. It's a whole historic survey of actual people. There were people just like us that just lived in another era. And the things that they made reflected history of the times. And
Was that another one that you would send, that someone would send anonymously?
it's not signed. I have to assume that someone sent it, and it was probably found.
Sweetheart, you have a very big problem.
So I really love it. You don't find many of them. I mean, that's the only one I've seen like that.
Yeah, they probably get torn.
Truly. And these comic ones, people really didn't like them, and I think they've just found their time. Now everyone's all excited. On the web you can find several articles that are new for this holiday about the comic Valentines. People find them intriguing. This is called a cobweb. The picture there has been pasted on top of another picture. The upper layer has been cut in concentric circles, so when you pull the little thread, it rises like a beehive, and you can see a picture underneath. And the new blog at the Metropolitan Museum of Art that I wrote is all about cobwebs, so it's on that little card, little public relations for myself. So here you see a close-up. I couldn't resist. But this also, the lace, the embossed lace that you see, is really probably before openwork. The openwork lace wasn't discovered or invented until the late 1830s, and that was accidental when 2 of the steel plates rubbed against each other, and so openings were revealed. And then that workman who invented that went on to start his own company, Mr. Addenberg. So that was a success. The next picture is not the same piece, but this shows you what it's like when you lift the cobweb. So they're,
So the version on the Met website has them animated,
Yeah,
sitting
yeah,
up and
yeah.
down. It's
right,
really
I
cool.
was hoping that they would get a picture of the inside of one, but they magic.
Now, is that hand cut?
Yeah. Some of these are machine made later, but these early ones are all hand cut. And they're really lovely. And often the image inside, very often you see a bird, sometimes you see mice. Everyone's trying to analyze the mice. And I just acquired one that has mice in the kitchen cupboards. So I guess it's romantic. I don't know. This shows you another kind. This is an actual Valentine. It's just a beautiful embossed card. Someone put gold paper around the edges. And the imagery is really part of what we call the language of flowers, which is a whole separate entity. And every flower has a meaning. So here we have the blue forget-me-nots and we have the rose for love. And if you get into details, every rose has a different color or a different meaning. We won't get into that later. But I just wanted to give you an idea of the kinds of things that people could be creative. Just the tiny little watercolor, which is, an inch, but they're all treasures. This piece I have in the case over here on the right wall. And what I love about this is the lace is made by a company named Meek, about 1850. And it's two pieces of the same pattern that are folded together. They've removed the central part of the top layer and replaced it with silk chiffon so that you can see the watercolor that's painted on the interior sheet. And this is also about 8 by 10 in size. There are a couple little things missing. There's a rose missing. I have a kind of a thing that if something is missing, I don't replace it. A lot of people do, but I just like it the way I found it. It's pristine. It's very unusual to have two open pieces like that together. This is another painted on silk moire. This is by a company named Rimmel in England. They were perfumers. You may have heard of Rimmel's famous book of perfume. And the story is that the woman who painted many of these images died from lead poisoning because she moistened her brush in her mouth. But he was very active. And one of my favorites, this is one of his advertisements. And I have a close-up of this. And I have many of them. But on the lower left, you'll see the name of the artist, Jules Chéret. He's the father of the French poster. And he, like many artists, got their start drawing Valentines. He was a protege of Rimmel. Rimmel was his sponsor of his studio in Paris. And you will see very expensive posters by Jules Chéret. And this gives you kind of a glance at the different kinds of lace ones that were very small. The one with the red and blue on the upper left is really only 5 by 7, so you get an idea that they're very small. The one in the lower left corner is by Esther Howland. She's the mother of the American Valentine. Valentines were being made, but she made it into an industry. She graduated from Mount Holyoke in 1847, and her father was a well-known stationer in Massachusetts, and she had him order supplies, and then she made these and started a huge industry. The story is that she sent her brother on a sales trip, and he tried to make some purchases, some sales, and he came back with orders totaling $5,000. And they say that her business equaled $100,000 a year. We're talking about 1850s, 1860s, is a lot of money. And she had like the first cottage industry or women's assembly line instead of Ford, where she would make a template, and for this cottage industry, she would put all the supplies in a box, put the finished one on the top, and then her coachman in her carriage would go out into the countryside and leave them. And women, when they finished their housework, they would make them, and you'd go around a week later and collect them all, and they would make pin money. So there are all these wonderful stories. This looks like American folk art, but it's English, and this is about 1804, and one of my absolute favorites. I can regale you with a lot of stories, but then you won't leave. I wanted to give them, if you have any questions, please. But this gentleman is toasting his wife with a glass of wine. close up. And he's saying that in war he served his king, and now he's home to serve his wife in peace. And we have around it all these elements of, I'll show you, we have the birds in the nest, we have primrose and mating birds and spring sprung. But my personal favorites are the handmade things.
Is it a sailor with his striped pants?
Yes. Yep.
She's the fallen angel.
Maybe, I don't know.
I was gonna ask, you mentioned a lot of these have birds in them.
Yes.
Just like the flowers, is there a language of birds? Are they?
I only know of the doves and the mating of doves.
Probably.
There's probably more to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the RPA?
Those are their initials. Those are their initials. The last name is Pitt. And on the back, because this was folded and mailed, there was no envelope, it's a very heavy paper, is the postal. It was, I now have one earlier, but this was said to be the earliest postal we used in England. And it's from the collection of Frank Staff, who wrote my favorite book on Valentines. And it was in an auction of his things, and I saw the materials before they went up to auction. It was in the bottom of a box, and it was folded. And I looked at it, I have to get this. And I went back to England to the auction, and he had put it on the cover. So I had to fight for it. And I got it. That was a turn. Yeah.
When it was mailed, they forwarded it sealed. How did they keep it shut?
Sealing wax usually.
Sealed.
Yes.
When did envelopes start to be used?
Well, they were really used after there was the English Exposition, the Royal Exhibition in 1851, and the company de la Rue had an envelope making machine where they demonstrated. There were handmade envelopes before that, but that coincided with the universal postal system where people could send things for a standard fee instead of distance. So all of these things came together. So the whole history revolves around the postal system and manufacturing of paper, the kind of paper that was available. And this one is an American one. It's large. It's, I think, like 22 inches square. And it's early 1820s, and it's from Burlington, Vermont. And I love the imagery of the house, and I can't really see it very well. I apologize. But it does have American eagles. And he says he loves her. She says, precious as sugar. And S-H-U-G-A-R. Precious. It's spelled differently, too. But I think about Vermont, where my children, my daughter and her family live, and what it was like in the winter, and how this might have been done by candlelight, and the romance of it.
Was that gold?
There's gold paper. It was cut out to be like celestial, and it's pasted on the blue fabric. As I said, every one of them has a square. This is a puzzle purse. And these 9 squares would be folded intricately, and it would be very difficult to get it back into place, but you could unfold it and read it by the number. There were lots of games, lots of puzzles, different kinds of things. This is another interesting paper cut, because it's paper, and then the inner heart has hair, and then there's hair woven in the hearts and hands.
How old is this one?
I would say it's 1820. It's in that era, you know. And I bought it in an online auction. I'm looking at, trying to make sure that I had the right internet connection so I could get it.
What was the hair about?
Well, hair is always a love token. I mean, they say that you really can't get the DNA, I don't think, from the hair, but it was like a memento that's often used. You'll see locks of hair. There's one here in the corner that has little locks of hair. It was like the ultimate token of affection. Hair jewelry for memorials. You see them in hair jewelry here. I have flowers that are made of hair. I have some interesting ones that were made just a few years ago by a young fellow in Switzerland who could make bouquets and everything out of his hair. So lost arts. Here it is close-up. This is another one with a story. And this is 1774, and it's Pennsylvania. And William Bryan was just a child. I have his parents' marriage certificate from 1663. I mean, from 1763, I apologize. 1763. So we have to assume that this was a family project. maybe everyone was sitting around the table, and they were using the motifs that are the classic, the tulip, and the dove, and the heart. And with the marriage certificate, I also acquired Continental Army bounty receipts from the father. They owned the White Horse Tavern in Brandywine, Pennsylvania, and the Battle of Brandywine, George Washington stayed there. And the man who offered that to me, when he mentioned, I said, I don't think I can afford this. And he said, well, you collect stories, and this has a story. So first he sent me all of the material about it, birth certificates and all kinds of stuff to prove that he was, and then he gave me a really good price. Then a couple of years later, he wanted to buy it back. Didn't sell it. But there are all these experiences. This is Jacob Botts, about 1780. He was a school teacher in Pennsylvania, and this was bought in Shenandoah Valley, Winchester, Virginia. There is a valley there that goes down from Pennsylvania, and this may be a reward. These professors, these teachers would travel when they weren't teaching, and they would stay at people's homes, and they would leave gifts. And I know that there's one to another sister, I think Susanna, but it was offered to me after I bought this, and I didn't have any money, so I spent it all. But they're interesting, and so this is Proctor that you hear about.
You mean they would make them and sort of
Dedicate
hold
them.
on to them, and then knowing they were going somewhere, they would take it with them?
I have a feeling that they were pre-cut.
Yeah.
That's what I think. But if you look up Jacob Botts, you'll find all these similar, these things that look like, I don't know, they look like, when you have a honey dipper and it has those kind of whorls on it.
Right. And how big was that? Is that?
And this is about, 6 inches high.
Is it paper? Or is
Yes,
it-
it's paper. This is paper.
And then page it over?
Mhm. So the connection between Valentines and rewards of merit, love tokens and tokens of affection, it's a lot of, the borders are very strange. They're blurred. It's all about love and affection. This is another paper cut, and this is also Pennsylvania. I look at it and I think of Masonic ideas, although it may not be, but that checkered floor and the devotion of St. a lot of similar symbolism, and it has the initials, which might have been custom. Maybe that was empty and then it was filled in, who knows. And it's one of my favorites because it reproduces beautifully.
The initials are cut as
Yeah,
well?
yeah. So the black is open look. It's the cut paper is sitting on a piece of black paper. Right.
So they could have made a bunch of them and then you add the initials.
Exactly. But I haven't found another one of this, so until I find another.
Is it lots of little pieces of
No, it's
paper?
one piece. It's one piece of paper.
It's impressive.
Right.
Go home
I
and
mean,
start writing.
but this looks like it could have been folded in half, and they did it that way.
They're so fragile. Were they kept in books or?
They were
how
kept
did
in books, they were kept in albums, some of these small ones have been found in the pages of Bibles, I think they were treasures, Sometimes they're framed. The one that I showed you, 1774, I have an article from a newspaper from 1909, and it describes the house where that's hanging on the wall. So, that was part of this material this fellow sent me. He said, I have no relatives and I want someone to have it who will love it. And then after he sold it, he discovered some relatives. But it's mine now. And I've written about it and published about it. And this gives you an idea of some of the love tokens. Sometimes it's just woven paper. The bottom part you can't see, which has the green. It's really a weeping willow tree. And that was in a book where someone was saying goodbye to someone who was leaving. These are all tender mementos. And on the top, you see that blue circle. And the circle, it's not really a good picture, I apologize. That's a watch paper. I think it might have them there. They were popular. This is the woven heart in hand. The frame, which is transparent, is from a later era. But I bought it that way. I thought it just looked lovely. Theorem was a very popular craft that was taught in girls' boarding schools, in girls' schools. It was a stencil, the paint was applied, and then gum arabic was used to spread it the way it was. And this was, in fact, in in the little card, I have some of them, I listed where there's some videos, and this was, it was on Martha Stewart, and she loved this, and I was thinking that she's going to reproduce this someplace, but she didn't. But the cobwebs, she really loved.
What is the name of the craft?
Theorem, Theorem. Most familiar is, you'll see, like a fruit basket on velvet. It's very common, but it's a stencil. It's also called puna, which, to check with Valerie, it's an Indian word, right? P-O-O-N-A-H.
Buddha is a
Well, maybe that's where the
What is a town in India? Can't hear that.
Right, sorry. So it's an art form that was very popular in schools. This is a labyrinth. We had the endless knot of love. This is connected to that. I told you it's one of my favorite themes. This is a famous piece. It's been published in a book by Schaffner, her first name. And this is 1822, and this is Pennsylvania Journal.
Do you know what the message is around it?
I don't have a translation of this, but I do have it in other ones where it goes on and on about finding love, beauty, peace. This is another kind of a puzzle game because each flower has the petals lift up and there's a message behind it. And in the middle, it's a wheel. And the wheel turns and it points to a flower and there's a question, like, what man, first man you see, or what is your dream, or whatever, and then you lift the petal and it has the answer. And this is called the wreath of conversation. And the initials and the monogram are from Victoria and Albert, but it probably was not really royal, just someone made it to look like that. But it's a very special piece. Has all those passion flower. And this is to show you that there was lithographed stationery available. People would just write a letter. It was like a Valentine thing. Maybe that's all they could afford or what they really wanted to say. And this one is special because it was sent to Lavinia Dickinson, who was Emily Dickinson's sister. So it was sent from California, I think in the 1850s. It cost, I think, it says 10, but research said it really cost 40 cents to send it from California to Amherst. So, but, the history that you find with all these things is wonderful.
the first time refers to the bird's choosing.
Each bird is choosing now. Parker was mine.
Did she marry him?
I don't know if she does that. I think she did marry him. Did Lavinia get married? Did she?
Lavinia got married.
Lavinia got married. And there is an Emily Dickinson exhibit at the Morgan, which I told you that I love the sailor motif, so you can see it over and over again. But I wanted to show you different ways that it was done. And this is an engraving, and the steel engraving, copper plate, and the motif is the same here. He's looking at the locket, the bird is bringing the love letter, the setting sun, the ship going, the heart on the top of the mast. So, and he looks like a Bartolozzi kind of a character. There were Bartolozzi and Cordova both did Valentines, unsigned. And this is a wood engraving, and this is the same thing. He's looking at the locket, the ship is sailing out, so they were just done in different motifs. This is one of the first ones I ever bought, so it was fresh in my mind. Well, you'll see those borders sometimes, often, and I think that was a steadfast. Is the name of the ship. This is a sailor's Valentine quote. This is a large shell Valentine that would have been made in Barbados. They were manufactured and they were carried to England and to America by sailors. This is an unusual one because it's very large and it's mahogany instead of cedar. And the top lifts open and around the circle there of flowers is a wreath that comes out. It's made of shells and theoretically would be a bride's wreath to wear for her wedding.
How large is it?
It's about don't know, 16 inches. It's pretty big.
Would that be a proposal?
I don't know. Certainly a gift of love. The more conventional, the more usual sailors' valentines, you'll have two smaller octagonal boxes. They'll be maybe 8 inches wide, thereabouts, and they're hinged and they close. This is a single, large single. You can find, there's more information about them if you look online. There's a wonderful book called Sailor's Valentines also. This is another sailor's gift, and this is called a busk. And this is also always competing with other collectors of folk art and different. This is scrimshaw. It's whale ivory, whalebone, and it has that endless knot of love on the bottom and something on the top. It has a bouquet of flowers. It has the bird, and on the back of this one, written in ink, is the whole history about this was given to, by my father, who was the captain of this ship. And the red is sealing wax that's been pushed into the little grooves, and the black is lamp black. And these would be given as a love token, but the woman would wear it in the center of her corset. And so she would be a constant reminder of her beloved. I'm sure it won't come And so we talked about sailors, now soldiers. And I mentioned that Valentines reflect everything that was going on, all the wars, everything. You can find something relating. And this is a Civil War Valentine, probably the iconic one. I think, maybe because I say it as I've reproduced it as that in different articles. But an interesting thing about it is that the flag is draped over the tent, and then when you open the tent, you see that the soldier is writing to his beloved at the desk, it's the folding desk, and the woman is in the background with this, dreams, reverie. And the poetry is always things like, I think of thee. These were sold in packets for soldiers, and for very little money. And some, in fact, it said that Walt Whitman visited soldiers in hospitals, and he would give out stationery to the soldiers also. These are two envelopes. I have in the case, although I only have one shown. These are envelopes that went with that Valentine, and the interesting thing is that the lower one shows a Civil War soldier, but the first one, the upper one, is really the way it was done. And we have a Romeo, and this is called the Romeo and Juliet envelope. And you notice that he has his hat with the feathers. You can see around her derriere, he's holding his hat. But as the war heated, I guess, they changed the stone, and they changed Romeo into a Civil War soldier. But they neglected to remove the hat. So the hat is still there. So that's kind of fun. But here we get into philatelic material also, and so but it's interesting, and I collect it all. This is another one by Esther Howland, who I mentioned, the mother of the American Valentine, and we see the American flag, and this is obviously the Civil War era, and I love the way the things were done. She's got the couple on the bottom, and that little die-cut scrap, they're kissing, but you have to lift the lace to see it. She was famous for the little colored wafers that she put behind the lace, and little springs, paper springs, to make it stand out, although she really was not the inventor of those. This is one of her more elaborate pieces, and the smaller ones all have her marks on them, either New England Valentine Company or H. The large ones were never signed, and even the ones in Hallmark, I've asked them, because things like Hallmark is a tribute from Esther Howland, but I've had them look at all that they have and none are signed. And the story is that one was given to a woman who rejected the suitor because he spent too much money on Valentine, and that they could cost $30 to $50, which was the price of a horse and buggy. There are many silvered layers. You really can't tell without seeing it, but the layers lift up. And this is one of the interior layers, and this is another interior layer. She was famous for these floral baskets. And each of those little flowers is an embossed paper and then hand-colored. And she bought them from Germany, and she told them they really should make things that were pre-cut to make it easier. And then later, there were printed ones, and they decided that was not a good idea. But shortly thereafter, they started manufacturing companies. But all of this,
So accept is a plea,
I'm sorry?
it says accept on the bottom,
Yeah.
so like resist.
It's the opposite.
Accept. Please accept. So these would have, they had to be boxed sometimes because they were so heavy. And this, I wanted to show you, this is one of the stores here. This is Nassau Street, one of your neighbors. T.W. Strong is very famous. They made all kinds of Valentines. They lithographed some of the comic ones. They sold elaborate ones, and they were in existence for a long time. And they had Valentines of 1,000 kinds, from 6 cents to $5. And we're talking about 1840s, so $5. Yes, and there's close-up. Hmm?
What were toy books?
Oh, well, books that were about toy subjects like Cinderella and, right?
They're small.
Toy size.
Oh,
So, the,
Miniatures.
so,
3 by 4.
so when you see these pictures and then you zoom in, you see details like things that they're selling. On the upper right, it says Valentines. And this is another one. This is Fisher, and he's weird. He's got the same address, 98 Nassau Street, as that one, which
34 years
yeah,
later.
but it even looks different because on this one, you can see there are steps on the right, and I was comparing pictures, and the fronts look very different. But I love seeing, what was going on at the time, and looking in the window and seeing Valentines hanging up, and also sell games. So we get a little bit of history. This is another catalog. This is 1881. This is from McLaughlin. McLaughlin was a famous publisher of all kinds of books and games and Valentines. And this is an example of the McLaughlin, later Victorian Valentines, say 1880, with the layers of lace. Some of them were really not very pretty, but this is one that was done by a more tasteful person. This is by Walter Crane, famous illustrator. I mentioned many illustrators got their start doing drawings or artwork for Valentines. So you'll find things by a lot of famous people. This one is one of my favorite images. And there was a book called The Quiver of Love, published in 1874, and there were 4 images by Walter Crane and 4 images by Kate Greenaway, and they were made into Valentines as well. This is Kate Greenaway, but not from that book. This is from the book Malcolm Manor. But the image, the swans, when they put their heads together and the cards, and it's just the medieval design, the deer looking at them, the swiftly lake smoothly sleeping with the meadows between, the swans are in bridal array. I mean, the poetry is wonderful. And there's nothing on the market today like these. I was looking at a rack in my local, in a grocery store and in a shop, and I didn't find anything I wanted to buy. But I think these are really wonderful.
Was this degree of craft, personal craft, done for other things like Christmas cards?
Oh, yes, yes.
Running parallel, or was Valentine,
Well,
was Valentine custom?
Until the Christmas card became popular, the Valentine was the card, and then as soon as Christmas cards started, I'm talking 1848 or something or other, the first Christmas card that started, catering to the Christmas audience, and Christmas cards became were sold. But until then, the Valentine was a priority. Life was short. Love and marriage, death, they were all celebrated in ladies' books and diaries and greeting cards. Everything was very important and celebrated.
Go to the Greenwich Village Ephemera Fair next weekend.
Yeah, the 18th.
Tell us that.
This
Yeah,
weekend.
this weekend. Is it both days or just one day?
It's on Hudson Street.
It is on that.
Yes.
Books.
I
No,
know.
it's got ephemera.
Ephemera is always mixed in. Not always, but more and more. So,
Same ephemera, Greenwich Village.
Great.
so cards like this would be made in different sizes, different versions. This one has silk bunching around it, and you see the string. You open it up, and there's poetry written inside. And sometimes they would have lace, and I'm sure there were different price points for how elaborate you wanted to get. Just like with Rimmel in England, he had all kinds of things. So Kate Greenaway for cards, and there were many sizes. Many are just little album cards. And so I kind of made a collection of all of these individual people also. And this is a Rimmel fan. The sticks fold up into that bouquet when you pull it. And the same fan was made for Christmas, because I have one that has Merry Christmas on it. So there were multiple uses. And this is Louis Prang, very famous. He was the father of the, the father of the Christmas card, so they say, in America. He was in Roxbury, Massachusetts, and prolific. His work is beautiful. He was said to have been the best lithographer. And when he was really getting his start, he was also a manufacturer of Civil War maps and Civil War cards. He would study where the Civil War battles were going on and create the maps at night and sell them in the morning. So he was a real businessman, an immigrant. And here we get to Charles Howard, who was an illustrator from McLaughlin, and he made a lot of very caustic Valentines, and they say that he was very unhappy because he felt that he inflicted so much unhappiness, and they were very popular. Also never signed, and few saved because they were so insulting. This is a modern one, 1920s, a lounge lizard. I wanted to include it, but my slide had the white. So there, we have these comics from the early comics were really descendants of the early English satirical engravings from the 18th century, and they're making them today. Today there's a movement that they call the mock Valentines or anti-Valentines, and some of them are the double entendre is really terrible, but I've looked back and there's double entendre in those early ones also, and some of them were, I couldn't bring back. I said, oh, that's a great piece of work. I don't like what it says. So this one was signed, a friend? Question mark. So we're getting to the turn of the century, turn of the 18th, turn of the 20th century. And here, chromolithography was becoming very big. People weren't spending a lot of time at home making handmade Valentines anymore. The Industrial Revolution had propelled everybody, and now chromolithography was king in Germany. And many American illustrators were illustrating for these companies, for Mister and for Hebrew Publishing Company, and Francis Brundage was one of, my mind is slipping right now, but Francis Brundage was one of the most famous illustrators. And here we have these open-out Valentines that were very popular, really from about 1890 until World War I. They opened out and they were magical. And they were very popular, as was the postcard. And postcard collecting, also people would send postcards any time of the year for Valentine's. I'll send one to you in Nebraska or wherever, you send one back to me. This is an interesting one because it has a wheel on each side, and when you turn it, it becomes a kaleidoscope. And so these kaleidoscopic cards were done for a lot of holidays, for Thanksgiving and for Easter. Easter egg would be purple and yellow kaleidoscope. And so they were very popular. And here we have modern times, and we have Disney made Valentines for many of their movies. We see a lot of wonderful Mickey Mouse and Pinocchio, Alice in Wonderland, everything that came out had a movie. And here we have Superman, to my Superman, ending with Wonder Woman. So that takes us into the 1930s, 1939, I think. God bless you. That's our punctuation. So Valentines, today you can still buy many of these. Postcard Valentines are readily available. Sometimes you can buy them for $1, $5, and you can get signed ones by people like Clapsaddle and 12 Trees. And so they're very collectible. But the early ones still appear. You can find them if you go to these shows and hunt and become knowledgeable and want to be a collector. So now you know more about Valentines than you ever knew existed, or ever wanted to know. I have some things, as I said, in the two cases on both sides that you might look at and have a different feeling for now. I tried to do the evolution, but they're a little bit mixed up. But I just wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day.